This is a very hard question. Just based on the answer choices, we clearly have some hard words that many of you probably just don't know. I will go over those definitions. But the other thing that's weird here is that it's very clear just reading this passage, there's a lot of twisted relationships in here. So let me just show you what I noticed as I'm reading it the first time. Rejecting the premise that the literary magazine Ebony and Topaz should present a unified vision of Black American identity. So rejecting unity, I guess. Editor Charles S. Johnson fostered his contributors' diverse perspectives by promoting their authorial autonomy. I barely understand what that says, but okay, like I guess we're talking about Johnson, and now he's doing something good. There's something about diversity. Like I understand enough. We'll get to what I would do next, but let's just keep reading. Johnson's self-effacement diverged from the editorial stances of W.B. Du Bois and Alain Locke, whose decisions for their publications were more blank, right? And so that's what we need to figure out. So for me, I can tell that there is a contrast here. The word diverged is doing a lot of work telling me that I need to contrast Johnson with these other people. And the blank is about the other people. So let's just do that down here in a little bit of scratch paper. I would do this on my real test. I would write this down. I'd be like, okay, Du Bois and Locke, we don't know what they are, right? But they're the opposite of Johnson. What do we say about Johnson? Well, now let's go back, right? He rejects unity in favor of diverse perspectives. So he's diversity, he's not unity, whatever that means. And it later says he's self-effacing. Maybe you don't know what that means. We can put it in this list anyway, self-effacement. But hopefully this is enough to go on, right? So if we're saying that Johnson is about diversity, then maybe these other guys are about unity, right? Let's be really lazy here with how we fill in that blank. Is they're specifically saying that this guy Johnson is rejecting the unified vision of Black American identity. So that also sounds like a little bit of a contrast. So let's try to mirror that with this other part of the sentence or other part of the passage that involves the blank. And so now I've got something to go on. It's pretty much just me flipping around what they said, but we want to stick as close to the passage as possible. So try to make those simple moves whenever you can. Now we say, okay, is there anything that talks about like unity here in these words? Well, proficient is a word you should know. It's a very good SAT word. It just means skilled. So I don't know, being skilled is being unified, right? Like, I don't know, that doesn't seem related at all, so that doesn't really work for me. Now, dogmatic means that you're really like all about the rules, right? So the related word is dogma by itself, which dogma is rules and morals and principles, and specifically like there's like a code of rules, a code of morals. So think of like a religion is as a kind of a set of dogma. And if you think about like the Catholic Church in particular, which has this big, the Pope and all the bishops and cardinals and all these things, it's a lot of hierarchy. There's a lot of dogma, and they're very dogmatic. Is like you have to do these certain rules, and this is what you can eat on Fridays, and like all these things. So that maybe has something to do with unity because it has to do with this idea of like, everyone has to follow the same rules. I don't know. So dogmatic is something about like being rule-based, like a stickler for the rules. So maybe that fits. Ambiguous means unclear. That's another good SAT word that comes up in a lot of tests. So something's unclear, has multiple meanings. Again, that doesn't sound like it's unified. It means maybe even the opposite, that there's like a lack of unity because it's unclear what the truth is or something. So that just doesn't make sense. And unpretentious, I'm actually going to go by defining the word pretentious, which maybe you've heard. It does come up. Basically means you're like arrogant or kind of like you're pompous, maybe is a good word for it. You're very full of yourself, And so if you're unpretentious, that means you're not full of yourself. So you're kind of just more normal, more subdued, not really bragging about things. But again, I don't know. That just doesn't have anything to do with being unified. So the other words are hard words, but they don't have anything to do with being unified or anything like that, or diversity. So they're just random. And this is often what happens when we have questions involving words that you are unlikely to know, is it's purely about knowing them. So, studying more vocabulary can really help, because some of these questions are only hard because most people don't know the words. But if you do know the words, there's really only one answer choice. So I don't think dogmatic stands out as definitely right, but it is the only one that I can relate back to being having like lots of opinions versus just kind of settling on one opinion, right? So Johnson is about getting diverse perspectives, lots of input, lots of people's viewpoints. But if you're dogmatic, there's one set of rules. There's one set of ways to do things, and that's it. You cannot deviate. So it does fit, but of course you've got to know the word. Feel free to comment if you have questions. This is a very hard question, but if you can learn some vocab, a lot of it will become a lot easier, but we still might need to use some dumb summaries like we did down here and get those kind of like twisted relationships under control.